Hello, and thank you for joining Helaman's Army today. I've got a doozy for you today. Heber J. Grant, video number 10 in my discussion of consecration versus communism. This one is pretty intense, and I have an enormous number of sources to get through, so hopefully this video doesn't last too long, but just a heads up, this will be a very lengthy video, or a video with a lot of information. So we've got some history to go over. The more I dug into Heber J. Grant, when I first started looking at it, I'm like, there's not much there. And oh my goodness, I was so wrong. Heber J. Grant has an enormous amount of stuff in relation to socialism and communism. And he is the first president, first prophet to stand up and say, no, do not engage in this behavior. So much so that he released a couple of official declarations from the church. But before we get to that point, I think it's good that we start with some history. The first one I'm going to talk about actually is in General Conference. This is the 1920, October 1920 General Conference. And this is the only time where Heber J. Grant discusses socialism in General Conference. It's actually not him that's discussing it. He's reading letters from senators. So he's reading a letter from Senator Thomas of Colorado. Now, I'm not going to read through all this. As always, the sources are in the description, and there's going to be a lot of them today. Lots of sources today. So go into that description, pull them all up. I've got links for you. Pull them up, go through and read them yourself. That way that you can say, you know what, I went through this myself as well, and I understand. Or at least you'll understand where I'm coming from. So here's a letter from this Senator Thomas. I'm just going to go ahead and select what I'm going to talk about right here. Maybe I should have just highlighted it or underlined it. He said, "We have not many Mormons in the state of Colorado. Some years ago, a settlement was established in what is known as the San Luis Valley. It has grown, it has flourished, it is prosperous. Its people are law-abiding. They are industrious. They are hardworking. They pay their debts. They obey and support the authorities. Bolshevism, anarchism, and socialism are foreign to the atmosphere of that community. They cannot take root in such a soil. These people are today, therefore, one of the pillars of the social, economic, and political systems of the country, whose removal might imperil the entire structure of our social, economic, and political life. Their faith I am not concerned with. Their character and their achievements are a credit to them and an incalculable benefit to the country." Interesting statement. So as I dug into that statement, I realized that these are all letters from different people to the President of the United States, which Heber J. Grant shared in General Conference. Senator Ashurst of Arizona, he read that one. And then he read this statement signed by many folks, the Board of Governors, statement of refutation. So there was some sort of something happening, and they were writing letters to President Harding. It was President Harding at the time, to let him know that, hey, look, these Latter-day Saints, these people you're calling Mormons, they're really not bad people. And that starts Tribute to Latter-day Saints. So Senator Smoot of Utah, which we'll talk about here in a second, and then statement of refutation from the Board of Governors, the Senator Ashurst of Arizona. These all people were speaking. They were defending the church. They were defending the people. They were defending the culture. And so there was this, whatever falsism that had made it to President Harding's desk or into his ears, there were all these people that stood up and said, no, that's not right at all. There's a lot of letters that were written. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. So in order to continue on, we really need to dive into history. Specifically, let me get rid of that guy. We're going to dive into some web pages because they are the best sources I could find Unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of the web page source, but because most of the time they're not a primary source, but they're good enough, I think, because it's well documented, and it's I don't take web pages where they don't have a source written down, where they don't have anything, where I can't go out and go to a library and pull it up. So this part really, this is the political thought and activity of Heber J. Grant, 7th President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is found on the BYU Scholars Archive. This is Thesis, Theses and Dissertations on the BYU Brigham Young University website. This one was done by Loman Franklin Idelette. I'm not sure how to say his last name specifically. I probably just butchered it, and I apologize if he ever runs across this. But what we need to know is this historical background right here. Heber J. Grant had served in the Utah State Legislature. At the time, it was a territorial legislature, and he was a very strong proponent of the prohibition. I believe it was the 18th Amendment, where they basically prohibited alcohol in the whole country, and so he was politically active, and during these years that he was the Utah State Legislature, we get this statement. During these years, he held several state posts in various temperance organizations, and the fact that he held a prominent position in the Mormon Church made his prohibition stand an asset to the movement, although his position also kept him from being as active as he would like to have been. Because he was the most outspoken of the general authorities, many times his opinions clashed with those of fellow apostle, Senator Reed Smoot, a local optionist. After Grant became president of the church in November 1918, the once strained relationship between him and Reed Smoot was replaced by one of cooperation, as Grant became converted to Smoot's importance to the church and to Utah, and Grant often voiced his support. The New Deal met with hostility from Grant because of the repeal of prohibition, the liberal legislation enacted, and the careless and overly generous public relief maneuvers which he saw as sapping the pioneer initiative from the Mormons. At this time, Grant introduced the church welfare program. President Grant's political ideas were dominated by their moral overtones. Also reflected was the Mormon pioneer tradition of self-sufficiency. Grant's idea of church influence was different from the views generally held, and he had pictured himself as a figure of forbearance. The restraint he did show was probably due in large measure to negative public reaction. So he was an all-in kind of a guy. You're all in or you're all out. And boy, he had a very tumultuous view of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The New Deal met with hostility. So that's just the beginning. So there's a link to this webpage if you want to go through and download this dissertation and read it. You're welcome to do so. Obviously, there's a link that you can go do that. But man, I don't have time in this video. So the Millennial Star blog by Geoff B. There's quite a bit on the web that he does, and he does a nice job on his blog. Or I don't know if he still updates it, but this is back in 2007. He was reading a book called Presidents and Prophets by Michael K. Winder. I looked for this source, and I could not find it, so I'm just stuck with this. But just this section here, Church President Heber J. Grant was vocal in disapproval of the policies of the 32nd president, especially after the death of his pro-Roosevelt first counselor, Anthony B. Ivins. In September 1934, is when Anthony B. Ivins died. He would often become upset when discussing FDR, and in one heated discussions, slammed his cane on the desk of Franklin J. Murdoch, shattering the glass desktop in his anti-Roosevelt fury. It comes as no surprise, then, that in the election of 1936, President Grant openly endorsed the Republican candidate for president, Alf Landon. However, he pointed out that he was speaking for himself and not for the church. As the 1936 election drew near, an unsigned front-page editorial in the church-owned Deseret News accused FDR of knowingly promoting unconstitutional laws and advocating communism. Former First Presidency Marion G. Romney, a staunch Democrat committed to vote for Roosevelt, was deeply torn. After fasting and 3 hours of prayer, Marion concluded that the editorial was inspired and given through the Lord's prophet. He then reversed his political loyalties and labored to dissuade his friends from voting for Roosevelt. Pretty intense. Matter of fact, Marion G. Romney, as we'll find out later, he was a staunch. Him and Heber J. Grant, J. Reuben Clark, David O. McKay, they became the core of this anti-communist movement in the church. Matter of fact, the ripple effects of which were felt for another 80 years. It's pretty incredible. So today in Mormonism history, that's this webpage. So 70 years ago today is the post title, April 12th, 1945. This is actually not Heber J. Grant, but I think this is significant to the discussion. Therefore, I am including it, just this section here. This is from Joseph Fielding Smith regarding the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It has been a marvelous thing how Mr. Roosevelt influenced so many people, and since his death, the cry has gone forth from many people, as reported in the papers, that the nation is now left helpless or in critical condition, with Mr. Roosevelt gone, and unable to guide the ship of the state. There are some of us who have felt it really an act of providence. This man has been in office too long for the good of the nations. He built up the greatest political machine that was ever known. He increased the number of government employees 10 times over any predecessor. It is considered that with the number on the government payrolls and those financially influenced thereby with their friends, something like 6 million votes have been controlled, if not more, and there is little chance for any other candidate with this handicap against him. Moreover, we are rapidly falling into a dictatorship, comparable with those which have been condemned by us in other countries. The liberties of the people are curtailed more and more, and the exercise of authority has been placed in the hands of boards who act as both supreme judge and jury, and jailer without justification of the law. The Supreme Court of the country has fallen from its high pedestal and has become a political machine, reversing old and staid decisions of justice when the expediency of politics demands. That sounds pretty familiar. And quite frankly, I don't care who you're voting for in this upcoming election, but what I am going to say is that as far as Joseph Fielding Smith and I are concerned, it's too big. The government is just too big. And the source is from Joseph Fielding Smith's diary, as quoted in the Minutes of the Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 1910 to 1951. It was privately published, Salt Lake City, Utah, 2010. I'm not sure where to get a copy of that. Being privately published, I'm not sure if I'll ever get a copy of it or how it came out to be, but nonetheless, it was published. Man, the government bloat has gotten worse and worse and worse, significantly more than it was back in 1945. So that's my statement on that one. Connor's Conundrums is a blog in which I found a letter to the Treasury from the LDS First Presidency in 1941. He goes through and explains how he found this letter. Apparently, he found a quote online, and he couldn't find the source for it. Like me, he was digging for the source, and eventually people were like, "Hey, it's apocryphal." He finally found a copy of the letter in a library, which, if you go to the link, he'll tell you how he found it. And it's also documented in a book. Anything that is, hold on a second. The 1941 letter can be summarized as simply being given to an FDR administration appointee by an anti-FDR First Presidency, Heber J. Grant Presidency, which was Heber J. Grant, J. Reuben Clark, and David O. McKay. So basically, as FDR prepared to thrust America into the Second World War, the issue of financing naturally came up. Ultimately, the heavily propaganda-laden defense war bond campaign was created, mainly as a continuation of previous bond offerings, to encourage all citizens to buy into the war with their own money. As part of the coordinated effort to achieve this widespread participation, the National Organizations Division was established. A description of this is as follows. His emphasis is added. I'm not going to read that to you. Basically, there was a letter written from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to William C. Fitzgibbon of the Defense Savings Staff. This is a long letter. It is 18 pages. I am not going to read this to you at all. I'm just going to highlight a couple of points. They quote a lot of things out of the Articles of Faith. They quote some scriptures. They quote some just doctrine to them. But one thing that should be pointed out, and I did not highlight this before, so hopefully you're okay with me looking for it. It doesn't matter because I'm looking for it anyway. I may just need to use the search function real quick. It's just such a long... Okay. Okay, right here. And this is within the letter. However, we do thoroughly believe in building up our home defenses to the maximum extent necessary. They're saying we don't want to go to war, but we're going to build up our home defenses. But we do not believe that aggression should be carried on in the name and under the false cloak of defense. We therefore look with sorrowing eyes at the present use to which a great part of the funds being raised by taxes and borrowing is being put. We are much impressed with the views of those military and naval men who say we are not militarily threatened. Lindbergh is who they're talking about, Charles Lindbergh. We believe that our real threat comes from within and not from without, and it comes from that underlying spirit common to Nazism, fascism, and communism, namely the spirit which would array class against class, which would set up a socialistic state of some sort, which would rob the people of the liberties which we possess under the Constitution, and would set up such a reign of terror as exists now in many parts of Europe. We feel that our defenses should be built against this danger even more than touted the danger of foreign military invasion, which many responsible military men tell us cannot come. So, just my comment on this is 100% sounds exactly like today. That we are now living in some sort of a socialistic state of some sort, which would rob the people of liberties which we possess under the Constitution and set up a reign of terror. You just have to look at what's happening today. Look at ever since 2020. I mean, it's even before 2020. It's been insane. But ever since the COVID situation, it has been constant overreach of the government. It has been stripping liberties without question and without people pushing back. It's been, I was amazed. My mind was blown in 2020, watching people just happily and cheerfully succumb to the government whims. It was nuts, in my opinion. And I am completely opposed to that sort of overreach, that sort of government power. It should never have happened. And that's my personal opinion. There's a big difference between saying, please go do, and you will do. And the difference is God says, please go do, this is my will. And Satan said, we will do. Huge difference. And matter of fact, as we continue on, that the war in heaven will become and the war for agency will become a very strong point as this communism discussion continues. Okay, we're going to continue on to General Conference of 1933, page 6 and 7. So these things, interestingly enough, they are not in order, and they all have the same name. So I have to find the right one. 1933. There we are. Okay, so page 6 and 7. Right here, I've already got it highlighted. This is all we're going to go over. President Heber J. Grant. The first thing I am going to read will be from the section 136 of the Doctrine and Covenants. This is the word and will of the Lord given to President Brigham Young. And if any man shall seek to build himself up and seeketh not my counsel, he shall have no power, and his folly shall be made manifest. Seek ye, and keep all your pledges one with another, and covet not that which is thy brother's. I cannot think of anything that appeals to me as being the mind and will of the Lord stronger than the last word that I have read, namely, covet not that which is thy brother's. I want to impress upon the minds of the Latter-day Saints not to covet that which belongs to any public institution, or that which belongs to any city or country or the government of the United States. Unless I have been misinformed, many people have said, speaking of the distribution by the government of supplies to the people, well, others are getting some. Why should I not get some of it? I believe that there is a growing disposition among the people to try to get something from the government of the United States with little hope of ever paying it back. I think this is all wrong. So this makes it very clear. Heber J. Grant is coming out swinging. He's not holding punches, right? Like, he is straight up in there saying this is wrong. We already know how he feels about FDR. He doesn't like the socialist programs that FDR is putting into place. He doesn't like the fact that that members of the church are getting welfare aid from the government. It's a big problem in his eyes, and so his response is to set up the welfare program. Make sure I get the right one here. Welfare. Let's go back to the web browser real quickly. Welfare and self-reliance. I'll put a link again in the description, like I always do. So this is just a description about the welfare program of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So right here, in April 1836, the church formally organized a welfare program to help church members suffering from the devastating effects of the Great Depression. Today, that welfare program has expanded to all corners of the globe and assists members and people of all faiths or no faith at all. So I would point out that this was started in, ironically, as we get closer to living the law of consecration, sometimes things get started ironically, or we figure things out ironically. And as I pointed out in the last video, that we watched the church go from being very excited, enthusiastic, and all in with the law of consecration of the United Order to realizing that, hey, we just don't understand how this is working, so we're going to back off, and they went back to tithing. And so they kind of grow into the law of consecration. This is ironic to me. This is hugely ironic. Here we have a socialist president who's making all these social programs, one of which was Social Security, which I'm still very upset about to this day. But Social Security and all these other social programs, and quite frankly, Heber J. Grant is not happy about this either. And so he makes this welfare program, the church welfare program, because he doesn't want people to get something for nothing. So they make the welfare program and they announce it in the 1936 General Conference. It was actually announced earlier in Deseret News in 1935, and I think it was J. Reuben Clark that wrote an article in the Deseret News that said, "Hey, we're working on this. Just hang in there." But it was the Great Depression, and it was Theodore Roosevelt's response to making everything socialistic, that the government, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, came out and said, no, don't do this. We're going to set up our own church welfare program. You'll have to work for it. You'll keep your respect, and you'll be able to go out and earn the food, or earn what you need, and not just get something for nothing. So this is how they did it. So ironically enough, though, to me, it is very ironic, because this is it's this massive overreach of the government that kind of pushes the church closer to living the law of consecration by meeting the needs of the poor and the needy. Interesting. I think it's wonderful. So, well, I mean, it isn't wonderful what the government did, but it's wonderful that the church stepped in and did what was right, and kind of stepped it up a little bit. So funding for the welfare program is provided by donations from church members. One Sunday a month, members of the church go without 2 consecutive meals and give generously the money they would have spent on food to the church. Now I can say mine's a little different than that. Generously on food. Well, yeah. I would highly recommend that as you pay your fast offerings, to kneel down and make it a prayerful fast offering. You're going to be fasting anyway. Make it a very prayerful fast offering, so that you and the Lord know and understand how much you're going to be paying. And it's okay if it hurts a little bit. If that's what God needs, it's what He needs. So and it's not what God needs, it's what our fellow man needs. If you're in the service of your fellow man, you're in the service of your God. So make it a prayerful fast offering. kneel down and talk to God about it. But at the time, so they go through and list all the great things about the welfare program up and down the page here. But I'm not going to read through all that because I don't, it's not about the welfare program specifically. But this is the end of our web browser stuff. So we're going to go back to General Conference 1936. I get the right one. I don't know which one it is. Hold on a second. 1936. On page 2. They're all named exactly the same, and so they don't, unless they pop up. Oh, that would make sense. Okay. Figured it out. My fault. Things I don't know yet, or things that I'm still struggling with. Okay, 1936, October 1936 General Conference. President Heber J. Grant, this is where he announces that they're going to make the welfare program. I'll try to select some of this. The announced objective set for the church under this program was to provide by October 1st, 1936, a wholly voluntary system of gifts in cash or kind sufficient food, fuel, clothing, and bedding to supply through the coming winter every needy and worthy church family unable to furnish these for itself in order that no member of the church should suffer in these times of stress and emergency. So here we're beginning to see the basis or the concept of the law of consecration coming back out to care for the poor and the needy. Previous to this, the church went to tithing, and everything came out of the tithing fund. All of it came out of the tithing fund. But here we see the separation of everything that goes into fast offerings is specific to caring for the poor and the needy. And this was the main point: work to replace idleness. This was exactly what Heber J. Grant was very upset about with FDR's proposal, with the socialist programs from the government, was that people were not working in order to get what was given to them. Said our primary purpose was to set up, insofar as it might be possible, a system under which the curse of idleness would be done away with, the evils of a dole abolished, and independence, industry, thrift, and self-respect be once more established amongst our people. The aim of the church is to help the people to help themselves. Work is to be re-enthroned as the ruling principle of the lives of our church membership. Our great leader, Brigham Young, under similar conditions, said, "Set the poor to work, setting out orchards, splitting rails, digging ditches, making fence, or anything useful, and so enable them to buy meal and flour and the necessities of life. This admonition is as timely today as when Brigham Young made it." So here in Texas, I don't have as many opportunities to go do stuff like this, but in Idaho, I went to there's a potato farm outside of Idaho Falls that I went and volunteered at quite a few times, just packaging up potatoes. It's pretty simple, but contributions to labor. It's all about contributing when you're taking something out. So I'm going to just leave this source here for you to read. I still have a lot of sources to get through and a lot of information to get through. And this is a very long talk and discussion about the welfare system. This statement right here, I'm actually going to read this because this is by Joseph Smith and it's about the Constitution, and I like both of those. So this is going to go on just a couple minutes longer because I'm going to highlight that. The Constitution of the United States is a glorious standard. It is founded in the wisdom of God. It is a heavenly banner. It is, to all those who are privileged in the sweets of liberty, like the cooling shades and refreshing waters of a great rock in a weary and thirsty land. It is like a great tree under whose branches men from every clime can be shielded from the burning rays of the sun. I agree, Joseph Smith. But see, even in our day, we're falling away from that. So, and that's we'll talk about that in the future. Okay, moving on. Or else there's so many sources that I've got so far. So we're talking about this welfare program. This is the welfare program being set up. Very neat Very neat talk that Heber J. Grant gave. I highly recommend everyone go and read it. We're going to move on to this one. J. Reuben Clark, 1942. I actually, video number 3 in this series, I already read through this talk, but there's one quote in here I just want to reemphasize because we're talking about the welfare program being set up in 1936. This quote right here. We have all said that the welfare plan is not the United Order and was not intended to be. However, I should like to suggest to you that perhaps after all, when the welfare plan gets thoroughly into operation, it is not so yet. We shall not be so very far from carrying out the great fundamentals of the United Order. There it is. So with this welfare plan established in 1936, and years later, 9 years later, matter of fact, sorry, not 9 years later, 6 years later, J. Reuben Clark realizes, hey, wait a second, this welfare plan is meeting the purposes and the point of the law of consecration and the United Order. Now, keep in mind, there's a difference between the law of consecration and the United Order, the way I see it. That is that the law of consecration can be done on a personal level, on a family level. That's the law of consecration. In that we consecrate our time, our talents, energies, everything we have to the church. That doesn't necessarily mean we give up the property rights. It just means that, yeah, you can use this. Like, I got a shovel. Here, you can use this, right? Bring it back when you're done, so I'll maintain it, right? That's consecration, the way I see it. And I'm sure there's going to be people out there that disagree with me, but that's the way I see it. It means that we've made it holy. We've contributed to the building of God. So the United Order is the law of consecration on the ward level or on the stake level, that each ward is sustaining each other. And so that's as far as I see it, that's the big difference, is that the United Order is a more official organization of the law of consecration. But I just wanted to point this quote out, that when the welfare plan gets thoroughly into operation is not so yet. It is now, today. But we shall not be so very far from carrying out the great fundamentals of the United Order. I think that's very important. Okay, on to the next. Oh man, this next one's great. So at this point, it's very clear. Heber J. Grant clearly is not into socialism. He's not into any of these political isms, which he states very clearly in this next source. And I'm going to read the whole thing because I think it's that important. And it's that big that I think it needs to be stated very clearly and very straightforwardly, because one of the things I've heard from multiple members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I believe that they're saying it out of ignorance and not so much out of a lack of faith. I believe they're saying it out of ignorance. They're believing that some sort of communism or socialism is the United Order, and they couldn't be further from the truth. There is nothing about from Joseph Smith all the way through everything I've read, and all the way through Russell M. Nelson, there is nothing that I have seen that implies otherwise. Matter of fact, I've seen the exact opposite, where they've come out, and in this case is a very straight and direct forward way of saying it. No, it is not. So this was a warning to church members. It was published in the Improvement Era in August 1936. And this is a warning to church members. With great regret, we learn from credible sources, governmental and others, that a few church members are joining directly or indirectly the communists and are taking part in their activities. The church does not interfere and has no intention of trying to interfere with the fullest and freest exercise of the political franchise of its members under and within our Constitution, which the Lord declared, I established by the hands of wise men whom I raised up unto this very purpose, and which, as to the principles thereof, the prophet, dedicating the Kirtland Temple, prayed should be established forever. But communism is not a political party, nor it is nor a political plan under the Constitution. It is a system of government that is opposite of our constitutional government, and it would be necessary to destroy our government before communism could be set up in the United States. Since communism established would destroy our American constitutional government, to support communism is treasonable to our free institutions, and no patriotic American citizen may become either a communist or a supporter of communism. To our church members we say, communism is not the United Order and bears only the most superficial resemblance thereto. Communism is based upon intolerance and force. The United Order upon love and freedom, and of conscience and action. Communism involves forceful despoliation and confiscation. The United Order voluntarily consecration and sacrifice. Communists cannot establish the United Order, nor will communism bring it about. The United Order will be established by the Lord in his own due time and in accordance with the regular prescribed order of the Church. Furthermore, it is charged by universal report, which is not successfully contradicted or disproved, that communism undertakes to control, if not indeed to prescribe, the religious life of the people living within its jurisdiction, and that it even reaches its hand into the sanctity of the family circle itself, disrupting the normal relationship of parent and child, all in a manner unknown and unsanctioned under the constitutional guarantees under which we in America live. Such interference would be contrary to the fundamental precepts of the gospel and to the teachings and order of the Church. Communism being thus hostile to loyal American citizenship and incompatible with the true church membership. Of necessity, no loyal American citizen and no faithful member can be a communist. We call upon all church members completely to eschew communism. The safety of our divinely inspired constitutional government and the welfare of our church imperatively demand that communism shall have no place in America. Signed, Heber J. Grant, J. Reuben Clark, David O. McKay. First Presidency. So that was released in the Improvement Era in 1938. Very clear, straightforward statement. August of 1936. I don't know why I keep thinking 1938. August of 1936. The source, again in the description, I think it should be shared wide and far. Communism is not the United Order. It makes it very clear in this Improvement Era speech here, or editorial. Later on, in the 1942 General Conference, lots of sources on this one, folks. Lots and lots of sources. This same sort of statement is given once again by the First Presidency, comprising of Heber J. Grant, J. Reuben Clark, and David O. McKay. This is a very long message of the First Presidency. This is on page 88 of the October 1942 General Conference report. Link in the description. This is a very, very long message from the First Presidency. They go over all sorts of things. They first share their testimony. They share a message to the parents. They talk about welfare work. They talk about message to the youth. They talk about false political isms, which is what I'm going to share. And they talk about the gospel of love. Hate must be abolished, which kind of ties into the false political isms and the welfare work. The mission of the church, missionaries, church and state. I mean, it covers all sorts of stuff. Church membership and army service. They go over so much in here. God is at the helm. Righteous suffer with wicked, which they talk about here at the very end. And message to men in the service. And they finally close it out. But we're going to read the section on false political isms. It's going to sound very familiar to the one we just read. I just read, you just listened to, that one. False political isms. So this is a second time they're doing this. We again warn our people in America of the constantly increasing threat against our inspired Constitution and our free institutions set up under it. The same political tenets and philosophies that have brought war and terror in other parts of the world are at work amongst us in America. The proponents thereof are seeking to undermine our own form of government and to set up instead one of the forms of dictatorships now flourishing in other lands. These revolutionists are using a technique that is as old as the human race, a fervid but false solitude for the unfortunate, over whom they thus gain mastery and then enslave them. They suit their approaches to the particular group they seek to deceive. Among the Latter-day Saints, they speak of their philosophy and their plans under it as an ushering in of the united order. Communism and all other isms bear no relationship whatever to the united order. They are merely the clumsy counterfeits which Satan always devises of the gospel plan. Communism debases the individual and makes him the enslaved tool of the state, to whom he must look for sustenance and religion. The united order halts the individual, leaves him his property, according to his family, according to his circumstances and his wants and needs, and provides a system by which he helps care for his less fortunate brethren. The united order leaves every man free to choose his own religion, as his conscience directs. Communism destroys man's God-given free agency. The united order glorifies it. Latter-day Saints cannot be true to their faith and lend aid, encouragement, or sympathy to any of these false philosophies. They will prove snares to their feet. So I think that's fairly clear and fairly obvious. Very straightforward from the April 1942 General Conference. And so I'd like to just wrap this up with just a quick personal statement, quick personal thought. So hopefully not, I had so many sources on this one. I was really hoping to get through them quickly, and I think I got through them in a reasonable amount of time. But I encourage everyone to go back and read through all these again. Get to know all this stuff, and you'll know and understand that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has never in any way endorsed or sanctioned socialism or communism or anything of the sort. And there is nothing about the law of consecration that meets up any of those political ideologies. It's interesting to me how if I chose to live the law of consecration, if I live the law of consecration, I can do so in our society today. I can choose to do so of my own free will and choice. I can be generous, very, very generous in my fast offerings. I can be generous with the things that I own and with the property that I own and with the blessings that I have. I can share those with others of my own free will and choice. But under communism, that is not a choice. It is a forced decision. You don't have a choice. The government takes it from you. Thank you. As they say, as they take it away from you. And it is amazing to me that as much as people bag on capitalism, it is not perfect. And capitalism with the natural man at the helm causes a lot of damage. But capitalism with the divine man, or the enlightened, the sanctified by Christ, those folks, has brought more people out of poverty than any other ideology of all time. And it's very obvious to me that we can live in the United States and live the law of consecration. But I could not do such a thing in a communist state or even in a socialist state. And even within the United States, it's becoming more and more clear that that's where we're being pushed more and more and more. And it's very obvious at this point. And I would even say that we do live in a quasi-socialist state or even a full socialist state, given the blatant overreach from the government since the COVID situation, but even before that, the absolute absurd and blatant overreach shows that they don't care what you think anymore. They don't have any reason to not take away your liberties, which should be huge alarm bells for everybody. And the only way that we can fight against all this is to return to our constitutional rule, to get people out of office who've been in for longer than necessary, One of the reasons that Heber J. Grant didn't like FDR was that he was in office too long. I feel the same about many of our politicians today. They've been in office far too long. My politics, I'm a staunch constitutionalist. My politics are to vote you out. You've been in too long. Oh, you've been in for one term. That's too long. Get out. That's my politics. Get out. And you know what? We saw that happen in Texas this last primary election, and it was not completely, but overall there was a lot of politicians who were removed from office in the primaries, which I thought was fantastic. That really warmed my heart. And I'm hoping that I can encourage others to do the same. Increase your righteousness, go closer to God. Communism and socialism and the desire for that will go away. Remember that work is part of a gospel plan. It is necessary that it's by the sweat of our brow that we will eat. That was the commandment given to Adam. It was a statement given to Adam, and it's given to us as well. That same thing. It's by the sweat of our brow that we eat. And it's very clear to me that the way that the church stands, or at least stood, that the conversation has changed a little bit, and I'll get to it by the time I get into the 90s and early 2000s. But as I continue down this path, I just want you to think about the things that we can do, the things that the church stands for, and the things that our religion stands for. And there have been some political ideologies that I've had to drop, that I've had to change, because the more I dive into these older General Conference talks and the church history and what the church really stands for and what the gospel stands for, I've realized that in order for me to be a true disciple of Jesus Christ, I've had to change some of my political leanings and things that I thought. And it's more important to me to be good with God than to be good with some socialist who thinks that I need to give all my money to the government. That's my own personal thought, my own personal opinion. So I encourage you to start considering the law of consecration and living the law of consecration, what it would take for you to meet the needs of consecration, or to meet the purposes of consecration in your own life. And to start considering the prayers for consecration. What does it mean to consecrate? And start there. Start with the prayer. Start with the spiritual side. And all the other things will fall into place. And this message I give to you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.